Hey, this is Mohal Joshi from Los Angeles, California. I follow Indian foreign policy and defense with a special focus on Asia. You can follow me on Twitter at Mohal Joshi.
Hey, this is Kishore Narayan from Bengaluru in India. I am an international relations expert specializing in global security, conflict resolution, and international negotiation. My focus areas include peace building and digital diplomacy. You can find me on Twitter at Veggie Diplomat. Hello and welcome to episode 16 of India Rising, Strategic Affairs Conversations with Mohal and Kishore, a show in which we analyze the happenings from around the world and their impact on India. India and the rest of the world were taken by surprise by the sudden announcement by Prime Minister Narendra Modi on live television that on 27th of March, India had conducted an ASAT test. With this, India became just the fourth nation in the world after the United States, Russia, and China to have conducted such a test. Now, what is an ASAT? ASAT or anti-satellite are weapons which destroy or incapacitate satellites orbiting in space. This can be used to hamper and or disable the enemy communication and reconnaissance infrastructure. This would leave the opponent blind, making them vulnerable to attacks from the aggressor nation. While the United States and Russia have conducted such tests since a few decades, China just conducted a test in 2007. The test conducted by China involved destroying its own weather satellite at a height of about 850 kilometers above the surface of the Earth, which created more than 3,000 pieces of space debris, which created a massive problem for other satellites at that altitude and invited worldwide condemnation. The launch conducted by India was conducted in Balasore in Wheeler Island, which has now been renamed as APJ Abdul Kalam Island. Now, Mohal, if you can go through the history behind the ASAT program and also how it evolved.
Yeah, so the ASAT program has basically evolved from the BMD program, which is the Ballistic Missile Defense Program. So what's the ballistic missile defense? What's ballistic missile defense? So ballistic missile defense is a system which is used to detect, track, intercept, and destroy or incapacitate incoming ballistic missiles from the enemy. Now, after the 1999 Kargil War, India, due to the fear of a nuclear escalation with Pakistan in the future, wanted to purchase an anti-ballistic missile system to protect itself. Now, India at that time made inquiries about purchasing the Israeli Arrow 2 interceptor system. Now, USA was being one of the main partners in the system, refused to allow or sort of vetoed Israel to sell the system to India, citing that it would violate the MTCR or the Missile Technology Control Regime standards. Now, this blocking of a sale to India led it to realize that it needed to work on a development of an indigenous ABM or an anti-ballistic missile system. Now, India was able to acquire a couple of the Green Pine long-range tracking radars, which were part of the Israeli Arrow interceptor system. The DRDO, or Defense Research and Development Organization, which is based in India, developed the Swordfish long-range tracking radar, which is basically an acknowledged derivative of this green pine that we had bought from the Israelis. So this Swordfish long-range tracking radar has a range of up to 800 kilometers and can reportedly scan 200 targets, even as small as the size of a tennis ball. Now, in parallel to this radar being developed, India developed a two-tier ballistic missile shield or defense system, with the PAD as one component of the Prithvi Air Defense and the AAD, the Advanced Air Defense. So what this does, it's a two-tier system. The Prithvi Air Defense is for the higher altitude or the exo, or what's referred to as exoatmospheric interception near to the edge of space at an altitude of 80 to 85 kilometers, while the advanced air defense or AD was used for endo atmospheric interception, which is the sort of little bit lower than the pad at an up to a range of up to 30 kilometers. So this is like a two-tier defense shield. Now, um, so the pad was supposed to be a high altitude interception system during a missile's mid course phase, while the ad was supposed to be a low altitude interception system in the terminal or the final phase of the ballistic missile's trajectory. Now, this was tested like around like 2006 for the first time. Later on, after these was successfully tested, we started development on a new anti-ballistic missile interceptor called the PDV, or the Prithvi Defense Vehicle, which replaces the pad now, which was also now capable of destroying targets at an altitude of 150 kilometer. So this is just a brief history of how the ballistic missile defense, and then we will go into the references with ASAT. So Kishore, like, could you go into the details of what exactly happened on March 27th when the ASAT test was done by India?
Sure. Just before that, just a point to add on to what you mentioned, Mohan. So, for the commoner listening to this kind of a tech-heavy issue, the thing is that if the enemy fires a ballistic missile at you, he would actually launch it up into the exo-atmosphere. So the initial part of the launch, where you actually take quite a time to actually detect that there is a missile which is targeted towards you. By that time, the enemy missile would already be almost in its mid phase, and when I say mid phase, it would be in the exo atmosphere. Now, it is actually quite difficult always to target and bring down a missile when it is in the exo atmospheric range. So generally, what happens is by the time you respond to it, the missile would already be in its terminal phase, which means that it would be heading back into the Earth atmosphere, and that is the point that Mohal was trying to make of the endo-atmospheric interception. And therefore, there are multiple factors at play here. One is the excess gravity and the high velocity of the object that is falling back into the Earth's gravity. The second is the huge amount of interference provided by the atmosphere itself, and also the very limited time that you have to strike down the enemy missile. So all these kind of complicate how you end up having your own ballistic missile defense. And
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, go ahead,
yeah.
Mohan.
So what I wanted to give for the common listeners is like, or the common people like who might be wanting to understand this more. Like, just imagine you are throwing a ball from a far distance, let's say to a player far away. So the ball would take an oval trajectory where it would go all the way up to the highest point called the apogee,
Mm-hmm.
and then it would come back down. So the goal is like, if you could, when the ball is at the maximum height, it is also moving at the slowest speed. So when you can target it at its highest point, or maybe not at its highest point, maybe when it's starting to come down, that would be your exo-atmospheric interception. But if you let the ball come all the way down, when gravity takes over, the missile will be in its terminal or its final phase, will be moving at an extremely high speed. So interception would be hard. So the goal is, however higher you can intercept it the ballistic missile would be at a lower speed, which means that they would be easier to intercept relatively than when it's a terminal phase right at the end.
Perfect. Thank you, Mohan. So yeah, coming back to your original question, I'm sorry I had to take a longer detour for that. So with regard to what exactly happened on the 27th of March, uh, we actually ended up using a derivative of the Prithvi defense vehicle to destroy an Indian satellite which had already been decommissioned. And it's now commonly believed that it was a microsat R, and this was at an altitude of 300 kilometers. Now, to put it into perspective on how much accuracy and precision is needed to hit this kind of a satellite, consider these facts. At 300 kilometers, a satellite with an LEO, which is a low Earth orbit satellite, it travels at approximately a little over 8 kilometers per second. So even if the targeting is off by 10 milliseconds, not 10 seconds, but 10 milliseconds, you would miss the target by close to 80 meters. That's the kind of accuracy and precision we are talking here. Now, in an exclusive interview to ANI, the DRDO chairman, G. Satish Reddy, when asked about the reason behind choosing a 300-kilometer altitude range for the target, he indicated that protecting nearby space assets had to be considered. I quote him here: as a responsible nation, we wanted to be sure that all space assets were safe and all the debris decayed fast. And he also added that the ASAT missile had capabilities of had a range of up to 1,000 kilometers as well. Now he also added that the missile has technologies developed for ballistic missile defense applications, particularly the kill vehicle. Now, in addition to the DRDO chairman, India's Ministry of External Affairs, the MEA, also issued a statement indicating that this was a technological mission carried out by the DRDO. The satellite used in the mission was one of India's existing satellites operating in lower orbit. The test was fully successful and achieved all the parameters as per plans. The test required an extremely high degree of precision and technical capability. The significance of the test is that India has tested and successfully demonstrated its capability to interdict and intercept a satellite in outer space based on complete indigenous technology. With this test, India joins an exclusive group of spacefaring nations consisting of USA, Russia, and China. Unquote. So the questions now being raised are: does this actually mean that India is now entering into an arms race in the outer space? Now, again, as per the official press release from the MEA, India has no intention of entering into an arms race in the outer space. India has always maintained that space must be used only for peaceful purposes, and it is against weaponization of outer space and also supports international efforts to reinforce the safety and security of all space based assets. India also believes that the outer space is the common heritage of humankind, and it is the responsibility of all spacefaring nations to preserve and promote the benefits flowing from advances made in space technology and its applications for all. India also mentioned that it is a party to all the other major international treaties relating to outer space. India already implements a number of transparency and confidence building measures called TCBMs, including registering space objects with the UN register, pre launch notifications, measures in harmony with the UN space mitigation guidelines, participation in interagency space debris coordination activities with regards to space debris management, undertaking space object proximity awareness, and also collision avoidance analysis, and quite a few other international cooperation activities, including hosting the UN affiliated Center for Space and Science Technology Education in Asia and Pacific. India has been participating in all sessions of the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. Now, India also supported United Nations General Assembly Resolution 69/32 on no first placement of weapons on outer space. India continues to see the no first placement of weapons in outer space as only an interim step and not a substitute for concluding substantive legal measures to ensure the prevention of an arms race in outer space, which should continue to be a priority for the international community. India, according to the MEA, supports the substantive consideration of the issue of prevention of an arms race in outer space in the Conference on Disarmament, where it has been on the agenda since 1982. Now, what is the international law on weapons in outer space? The principal international treaty on space is the 1967 Outer Space Treaty. India is a signatory to this treaty and it ratified it in 1982. The Outer Space Treaty prohibits only weapons of mass destruction in outer space, not ordinary weapons. India expects to play a role in the future in the drafting of international law on prevention of an arms race in outer space, including inter alia on the prevention of the placement of weapons in outer space in its capacity as a major spacefaring nation with proven space technology. India is not in violation of any international law or treaty to which it is a party or any national obligation. Now, Raji Pillai, a strategic affairs expert, said in an article that India cannot avoid the increasing militarization of outer space and ignore the reality, and ignoring this reality will only hurt India's security interests. Now, I will have to take you people back to an eerily similar situation that happened during 1996 to 1998, in which India found itself racing against time to conduct a peaceful nuclear explosion. Let me take you to that situation then and explain how it panned out. India, right from its independence, had been a strong supporter of a comprehensive test ban. However, during the negotiations for a comprehensive test ban treaty, India found the reality had changed in its neighborhood. Pakistan had bombs in its basement, although it had not publicly declared that it had weapons, and China already had an arsenal with itself. So India remained part of the treaty negotiations that were happening in Geneva until the 11th hour. Now, what happened at that stage was that entry into force treaty remained in limbo until countries signed and ratified. Now, what does entry into force mean? Now, according to the negotiators, now at least about 40 companies should sign and ratify for this treaty to come into effect. And this also included all the nuclear powers, both de jure and de facto. India felt that this was a forced constraint on its sovereign rights and walked away. India basically had two complaints. One, that this would not lead to a universal nuclear disarmament, and two, that it was discriminatory on India. India, however, cleared the confusion around it and said that it would not stand in the way of entry into force of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. However, a bigger factor was being played out during this time. Mid 1995 saw talks about the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, being extended indefinitely. Remember, India always believed that the NPT itself was a flawed treaty splitting the world into two categories of countries, nuclear haves and nuclear have-nots. Countries like the United States, who wanted this to happen, who wanted the NPT to be extended indefinitely, saw India as an outlier. So President Clinton prevailed on the then Indian government, led by PV Narasimha Rao, to not go for yet another round of nuclear tests. Now, PV Narasimha Rao government agreed to it and did not press the button. And this was followed by a political instability during the 1996 to 1998 period, a period of about roughly 2 years. Now, when the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government came into power in March 1998, India realized that time was running out before the comprehensive test ban would become a reality, although it has been signed, but it is yet to come into effect. And India would be forced down, and the comprehensive test ban would be forced down India's throat. So the Indian establishment agreed to bite the bullet, and in May 1998, India announced to the world that they had conducted peaceful nuclear explosions and imposed a unilateral moratorium on itself. Now, there have been three governments after that, and none of them have felt the need to violate the self imposed moratorium. Now, the situation that India finds itself now in is kind of eerily similar to the situation that India found itself during the 96 to 98 period. Now, there are talks of having a international law on barring weapons in outer space, and India would again find itself on the other side of the aisle, where it would be forced not to conduct any tests to demonstrate its technical competence, and hence there was a need for India to kind of urgently test the capability and also ensure that it had demonstrative technical competence. So, Mohal, if you can now point out how many critics who argued that the test was hurriedly done for vested interests, approval for the test, and other controversies. Now, if you can point out that, that will be helpful for the listeners.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of controversy around the timing of this test and stuff. So interestingly, like the DRDO chairman Satish Reddy said that the clearance for the test was given back in 2017, a long time ago, almost 2 years. Now they did go into mission mode 6 months ago, so it wasn't like a sort of an overnight decision. Also, interestingly, the target satellite for this, which has been reported as per some reports to be Microsat R, which is not some old end of the life satellite, but actually it was just launched 2 months ago on
Mhm.
January 24th of 2019. So like it's not a really old satellite you just blow up. It's just like a actually this satellite was launched with a purpose in just this Jan. Now this shows clearly that the wheels for this test had been set in motion from some time, and it didn't just happen magically overnight as some critics would like to believe. Now, regarding the other part of the controversy, like, so regarding the approval of the test, defense journalist Shiv Arur, in an interview posted on Live Fist in 2010, had Dr. Avinash Chandar, then the directors of Advanced System Laboratory, stating on record that if the government, and I quote, if the government calls upon DRDO to deliver such a weapon, it would take less than 3 years to first test. Now, Dr. Chandar at that time further added that we have developed technology blocks that can be integrated to create an anti satellite weapon. What we need is the technology to boost the munition into space, which we have proven very robustly with the Agni program. And we need a kill vehicle of considerable energy and terminal phase accuracy, which our scientists have proven with the Advanced Air Defense or the AAD anti ballistic missile interceptor tests. Now we can put these blocks together and fine tune the weapon as an anti satellite weapon. If required to, we can deliver this. So the hints were there all along, even as back as 2010, that we had the capability, and the building blocks were there. Obviously, some fine tuning and some developments had to be made to do this, but the basic building blocks were there for sure. Now, regarding another controversy, regarding DRDO, the former DRDO chief Dr. Saraswat is a bit curious. The reason I say is that, uh, just after the test a few days ago, he had said to the effect that after India had carried out the Agni 5 capability demonstration, he had made presentations to the previous UPA government, including the defense minister, AK Antony, and then National Security Advisor Shiv Shankar Menon, to give clearance for the test, which he never got. I mean, this is something which, in a recent article, like, Shiv Shankar Menon has denied ever getting a request to do a test. But curiously, back in 2010, he told Life is that, and I quote, "We already have a design study of such a weapon, but at this stage, the country does not require such a platform in its strategic arsenal. Testing a weapon I think such a weapon also has lot of repercussions which have to be taken into consideration. But testing is not an issue. We can always rely on simulations and ground test. We can see in the future if government wants such a weapon. If so, our scientists are fully ready to deliver it." So there is like contradictions between the 2010 and the 2019, and this is something only like in future, more clarifications will be able to know like which of the two statements is like factually true, the 2010 where he wasn't so keen on it, or 2019 when he said like the previous government blocked it. However, what is undeniable in this controversy is that the National Security Advisor and Prime Minister Narendra Modi did give approval for the test to proceed on March 27th, 2019. However, there is a small difference that back during the 2010 timeframe, what India had developed was, uh, if India could have tested, it would have been more like a radio frequency seeker, which is used to locate the target and destroy it. But since then, we have made a couple of more advanced developments. Like one, we have developed an indigenous IIR seeker, which is basically an imaging infrared, and a more agile kinetic kill vehicle, which wasn't present back then. Which would and this both of these changes would now make a difference in the success probability of interception with the target. Sure.
Yeah. So, so that kind of explains the. So, what is the importance of this ASAT test then?
Yeah, so many defense analysts, including like Saurav Jain, Yusuf Unjawala, have said that the importance of ASAT test can be placed on the same level as the 1998 Pokhran nuclear test, the Pokhran 2 nuclear test.
Mhm.
Now, ASAT is not a conventional weapon to be used in war, but is rather a strategic weapon like nuclear weapons for deterrence. Now, the adversary might want to blind you or incapacitate you by taking out your satellites, but he now knows that if you have the same capability on your hand, you could return the favor by taking out his satellites also. So this is something like the nuclear weapons, like, he might launch on you, but if he knows that you also have the same capability, it might give him pause to use them, because he might also suffer the same destruction what you might get. So what India has done now is done is capability demonstration, which would send a signal to China, which already possesses this capability and would now have to take notice. Now Pakistan does have some satellites, but they don't have this ASAT capability. So this is more of sort of an evening of the odds with China, as some would put it. Now, space is as today is in a strategic domain with the proliferation of information and data sharing with between various elements and hardware systems of the armed forces in the C4 ISR domain, which is commonly known as command, control, communications, computer, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. So basically, it's like a interconnected world with data links among all the various military assets, which would be all highly dependent on satellites. Now, this deterrence capacity is useful to guarantee some sort of protections of one's own space assets versus the adversaries. Now, does this mean that you can take out all of enemy satellites and he wouldn't know anything? The answer is no. As like most of the communication satellites are either in medium or high orbits, more than like 1,000 kilometers above the Earth, and up to 36,000 kilometers for geostationary satellites. Now, the low Earth orbit satellites are the which can be targeted with what India has tested on March 27th, are the ones which are used for electro optical imaging, intelligence gathering, remote sensing and reconnaissance, which would be the under the threat from ASAT. Or I mean these the various capabilities I just listed are basically what you was commonly referred as spy satellites, or some of these spy satellites. Now we need to understand, I think Kishore, as you mentioned, that the ASAT test, in what context it has been conducted. It is similar to what you described, that the I believe it was the CTBT news that the incumbent nations attempted to put around India's neck in the lead up to 1998 Pokhran test. A similar space treaty has been in the offing, and they were trying to parcel India with it. So this is very crucial to see that we have sort of preempted any treaty being signed where we would be left out or left on the sidelines. Now that we have this capability, we will be part of drafting or uh, this treaty in the future whenever it happens. Also, the BMD aspect of this test should not be overlooked. The ballistic missile defense. Now, some have argued that this is more less about bringing down satellites and more about proving that you could do an atmospheric interception at very high altitudes for maybe like IRBMs, like intermediate range ballistic missiles, or even like intercontinental ballistic missiles in the future, because the longer the range, the higher they go up in the atmosphere, and you need to uh, try to intercept them at a higher altitude. So that's all, folks, for this week on the ASAT and its significance. Uh, like every week, we do our recommendations for this week. So if you're listening to our episode for the first time, each episode we recommend to you any book, article, or any other read we might feel might interest you. So keeping the practice going, Kishore, what is your recommendation for this week?
Yeah, so I saw a wonderful representative video model done by Analytical Graphics, a company which kind of works in the field of space simulation. And they showed how the hit to kill ASAT happened over the Bay of Bengal. So in that video, you can see the rogue satellite heading north over the Bay of Bengal towards Bengal and that region, Bengal and Bangladesh, and the ASAT headed out from Odisha, kind of climbs up and hit over the Bay of Bengal, mind you. And the debris kind of spreads out in both directions, both north and southward. Now, the only factual error that I see there is that the video kind of represents that there can be 1,000 to 2,000 debris that could spread out in both directions. However, I read an article from the United Nations, basically from Pentagon, saying that there can only be as many as 250 to 270 objects of satellite debris that could have been generated due to the hit. So, if you can ignore that factual error, I think this video model should be a good insight to understand how it works visually.
And also, I think as you mentioned that like this debris, whatever the number it be, they would eventually, because of the low height at which we conducted the test, they would disintegrate and as they fall back to earth over the next few weeks.
Exactly. So within about 3, 4 fortnights or maybe 45 days, either the debris would completely burn out or would fall back in due to Earth's gravity. Yeah. So, Mohal, what is your recommendation for the week?
Yeah, so my recommendation for this week is a article by Saurav Jha in
Mhm.
the Daily Defense Review. It just has more information on this latest Prithvi defense vehicle for the anti-ballistic missile interceptor, and I mean, also I would like to recommend not only this article but also the movie Gravity. Usually we don't do movie recommendations, but I'll change it for this week. The reason I say is that it shows a representation of how when an anti-satellite test happens, it creates a large debris field which can have uh, tragic consequences in space if the debris field comes in the path of other space shuttles or space stations or satellites, and which can have a cascading effect which could be very deadly in a space environment. Something to do with ASAT over here. So that, dear listeners, wraps up today's episode where we covered the hit to kill ASAT test conducted by India this week. To continue hearing about such interesting topics, please do subscribe to our channel India Rising wherever you are listening to us on YouTube or on SoundCloud. We would also like to hear from you if you have any suggestions on topics that you would like us to cover. Please do remember that these topics should be directly related to Indian foreign policy. Until the next episode, this is Mohal and Kishore signing off.